SwayamPrabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Welcome back. This module will cover land use transportation models and frameworks, and the first two lectures, lecture 6 and lecture 7, will cover the theoretical foundations. So the different concepts that would be covered in this particular lecture are economic theories of land price and land use, location theory, urban land use models, bid rent theory, and discrete choice model. While location theory, bid rent theory, discrete choice models, these are all part of economic theories, the resulting urban land use models arising out of theories, some of them will be also covered in this lecture. So the term land use in urban land use transportation models doesn't mean only land. It means different aspects of, it covers different aspects of human activity and also considers land price, the number of jobs in a particular area, or a number of residences, or number of built square foot in an area. All these things could be referred as land use. So the basic foundations of economic theories of land price and land use was laid by Ricardo and von Thunen. Now Ricardo said that land prices vary as per land quality. This was primarily talking about agricultural land, whereas von Thunen explained that land use patterns and land prices vary as per distances and transportation cost. So he says that more is the transportation cost, probably the land price would be less, and if the transportation cost is less, in that case land price would be high. Now then came the central place theory by Christaller, who explained that the different hierarchy or structure that in terms of size, location and number for cities depends on the services these cities provide and the demand from their surrounding hinterland. So this was the theory which was actually talking about why different, how many of big cities or how many small cities grow at a particular area, and how it is related with the surrounding demand or the surrounding or the kind of services this kind of big cities provide. Then this was linked to the industrial location theory by Losch, and where he said that different industries serve different market areas, and these market areas could be represented as hexagons, which also depends on the spatial competition between these particular industries. So these were the two theories which were actually extending the theories by Ricardo and von Thunen, and in addition to these theories, from the other point, from another aspect, from the aspect of geography, or you can say physics or classical mechanics, there was where Newton's laws of motion was also considered to explain the relationship between people or jobs and the spatial movement and allocation in an urban area. So these are the different ways the people have tried to find relationship between land use and transportation, and if I look into the different theories, I can summarize them as broadly into economic theories. Then there is the spatial interaction theory, then accessibility based location models, or we can also call them theories, and then there are the social theories. Now within economic theory, primarily it talks about different reasons why land use patterns are and why, and the dynamics of those particular land use patterns, and these are covered in the location theory and discrete choice theory. So these are two more theories within the economic framework. And then there is a spatial interaction theory based from geography, which also explains the change in land use. Accessibility based location theories, this actually combines the economic theory, particularly the discrete choice theory and the spatial interaction theory, and finally comes the social theories. So in economic theory, the basic point that it talks about is land is an economic asset with fixed supply and thus this results in demand and supply mismatch. That means sometimes there is more land available compared to demand, and sometimes the land is not available. That actually leads to increase in the land price. So this is the fundamental concept of land in economic theories, and we say that land persons each land person has a certain characteristic such as accessibility, altitude, gradient, soil quality, and so on. That also results in different land prices. So these are the two ways we can look at a land. And land use also not only influences itself, but also the surrounding land uses. That means if we have ecological park or a nice park in a particular area, the surrounding land uses probably would be benefited from the presence of that particular park. So land uses influences each other around, and in addition to all this, we also have certain constraints. For example, sometimes government also do intervene and develop some regulations which actually could be also called as externalities, where we can say that even though a particular land use is not supposed to be where it is, but government may encourage it to be there, or government may prevent a certain land use even though it has a legitimate right to be there. For example, if we take an example of a transport nagar or a freight transport hub in an Indian city, usually there are many cities which do have this, but people don't like them to be inside the city because there are a lot of trucks coming in and going out, people may feel unsafe. So government may bring in legislation saying that, well, residences cannot be near this particular transport nagar, or alternatively transport nagar should be at the outskirts of the city. So this is how government can also intervene, and similarly government can also say that, well, I could agricultural areas or small plantation areas could be encouraged inside the particular urban area so that it brings in a amount of greenery inside the city and so on. So that is how government can also play a role in determining the location and the dynamics of land. So the location theory explains that the economic rationale for a farm to locate in a specific point in space depends on particularly the transportation cost, or rather on minimizing the transportation cost. Now, when a farm locates itself, it probably looks into the production resources, that means where it gets its resources for which it uses to produce something, and also the final market where it sells its products. So the classical models of location choice is more or less looking into minimizing transportation costs, considering both the production part as well as the final distribution of goods part. And again, once this happens, the division of the spatial market among different producers and also distribution of different activities in space is also based on this transportation cost. That means it's not only how one farm locates itself, but also how a particular area could be divided among different farms for distribution, or alternatively, if we have a farm, how people coming to work in that farm, how they are distributed in an urban area, that is also considered when we talk about this location theory. So, and along with this, transportation cost, as we are talking about the farm should minimize transportation cost doesn't only refer to the opportunity cost of time. It doesn't only considers the actual cost of time, but it looks into the opportunity cost, which means this time could have been used in some other way, so that all the other uses that could have come with this time, that those losses will also be considered. So it's an opportunity cost. So in addition to this theory of minimizing transportation cost, in location theory, people also have talked about the concept of agglomeration economies, which says that economic advantages result when farms agglomerate. That means when different farms come together, economic advantages occur, which means this will lead to reduction in production cost, because if you have a large many farms, then you can economize on the type of farm or the type of equipment that are being used for those particular farms and so on. So that actually reduces production cost, and then it also results in more number of laborers, workers and services, and also presence of a ready-made goods market, which is already there because of the presence of other firms. So this is the concept of agglomeration economies, but as you can understand, this is in not directly related with transportation in a way, so that when transportation cost increases, it's not necessary that agglomeration economies will also increase or decrease. So it is not directly related, but what we can say is whenever a firm is choosing to locate with other firms, it may not result in reduction of transportation cost. So talking about minimization of transportation cost, Von Thunen was in his regional land use model first talked about the production, the minimizing of transportation costs between production area and the market. Then in the Landuse's model, it talked about minimization of transportation costs between residences and workplace. And finally, in Weber's model, minimum transportation cost was taken along with agglomeration benefits, and overall this was used to decide on the location choice of firms. Now, all these theories of location choice, primarily from transportation aspect or primarily from the concept of agglomeration economies, these were gradually also incorporated in the urban land use models, and we found that from Von Thunen's regional land use model, using this concept, E.W. Burgess first came out with the concentric zone model of land use, which gradually evolved to Hoyt's wedge or radial sector theory, and finally the nuclei urban land use model by Harris and Ullman. So this was the transition from economic theory to land. These concepts were gradually taken into the urban land use theory. So as you can see in this image, Von Thunen's model basically talks about the spatial distribution of sites based on its rent generation capacity, which is not direct rent generation. What it means here, rent basically means the cost of the land or the building and so on. So that means he says that at different distances from a market, that means from the central business district maybe, there the far away you go, you will incur more cost. You will incur reduced cost, and the more near to the particular market, the rent would be high or the cost would be high. So this concept was taken in the Burgess model, and which assumes that urban growth outwards from a central area, and it happens in concentric rings of development. So if you can see in the image, you can see the centralmost ring is the central business district. Then we have the zone of transition, which is basically a mixed residential and commercial zone. Then comes the zone of working class homes. These are low salaried workers. And then there are middle class homes, which are zones of better residences, and then the commuter zones. So this was the Burgess model. And as you can understand, not all cities follow this kind of structure, but in certain cases this structure was also found to be actually adaptable in certain cities. Then in Hoyt's sector theory, it more or less followed the same theory as Burgess, but it concentrated more on the residential land uses, and it also talked about how residential location choices vary between different socioeconomic groups, and he said that higher class residents tend to expand outward from an urban center and along the fastest travel routes. That means primarily maybe along the transit corridors and all, richer people started to stay along those particular transit corridors and so on. So the central business district remains at the center again in this particular case, and we can say that so we can see this, the central this is the CBD, and then from here we have wholesale and light manufacturing areas. Then low class residentials is in the surrounding area. Then there is middle class residential, and we can see the high class residential is moving outwards from the city, and that it is expanding towards the periphery of the city. And then from this particular theory again was not able to explain many of the existing urban land uses. So another theory came, which is the multiple nuclei theory, where instead of a single CBD like the earlier two theories, here Ullman talked about multiple CBDs, like for example this yellow box, this here the CBD remained as it is, and then we have another CBD coming up over here which is a sub business district, and then we have in the suburbs there could be an industrial suburb, there could be a residential suburb, and so on. So in in multiple nuclei theory, spatial structure is predominantly cellular, and cities have multiple centers which are the focal point of agglomeration tendencies. So this was particularly different from the previous theories by saying that a city could be polycentric instead of being monocentric. So next came the bid rent theory from Alonso, and here he says that farms and households choose a location at which their bid rent, which is basically the land price households are willing to pay, matches the rent or price that is demanded. That means demanded by the landowners or the house owners. So this results in a land market clearing process which brings in equilibrium, or to some extent partial equilibrium. What it means is a person will bid for a particular piece of land or a house for either for rent or for buying it, and his bid, if it matches with the asking price of that particular house, then only he can buy it or acquire it. This is the first thing. And the next thing is this, because of this, gradually supply and demand gradually matches, and it may not match immediately, but it can match after a period of time, or this process goes on continuously, so that if you take a very long period, then you will see overall the supply and demand matches, but in shorter periods there may be imbalances. So, and also the other considerations are people have perfect knowledge about the cost of land, the location benefits of that land, and so on. So if people don't have a perfect knowledge, then that also doesn't result in equilibrium. So what we can say is individuals or farms select a residential or commercial location which depends on a trade-off between building land price and transport cost. Now, what would be the rent per person or a farm, means a company is willing to pay for a particular piece of land or a building? It depends on, again, on the previous theory of minimizing transportation cost, that when the transportation cost, a person will make a comparison between the land price and the transportation cost that would be incurred, and he would make a compromise and choose one amongst them. He will choose one when they balance each other. So that being said, and this is from the demand side, and that means this is how the demand works out or how demand is determined. Whereas in the supply side, locations are rented to the highest bidder. That means the person who bids the highest gets that particular building or plot of land. So this results in certain bid rent functions or curve, as you can see in this particular image. This is the curve that we are talking about. In x-axis we have rent, in distance, and in y-axis we can have rent. And so what we can say is, if distance increases, rent actually is coming down. So at the central business district, which is at the center, their rent is the highest, and this slope depends on what kind of land use that we are talking about, or what kind of building that we are talking about. For example, in retailing, you can see the slope is steep. That means it's mostly concentrated at the center, then it gradually expands, but as it goes outwards, the rent decreases, and we find retailing only within this distance. Industry and commercial cannot afford that amount of rent, so their location, most of them cannot be at the central business, at the central area, but gradually they can. The slope is actually less for this commercial, and so goes on for apartments and single houses. So these are the bid rent curves, and this kind of functions have been implemented in many land use transportation model to determine which kind of farm or which kind of residences can afford a location in a particular urban area. Now, if I superimpose all the different curves that we talked about in the previous slide, we see it results in this image, where we see that the central location, if I trace back this line, this area, this is where you will find mostly retaining, because they are the ones who are able to pay more rent. Then comes the industry and the commercial areas, and then comes the apartments and single houses. So this was the bid rent curve, and this also matched with the Bourdieu's theory of concentric land uses. So that is more or less that fits into that particular theory, and we can also say that when we take a farm, the amount of profit it makes depends on the total amount of sale it does minus the production cost minus the transport cost, and then if I take this profit and divide it by the amount of land it will actually require, then we can say that that is equal to rent. So that means two farms making the same profit but having different sizes of land, the one requirement of land, the one which will require land less, will be able to pay more rent. So because profit by land area would be less for that particular farm. So that means a farm is able to pay more per unit of land if its profit is more and land requirement is less. So retail is found in the center and transport hubs, even though both are commercial activities, are found at the periphery because transport hubs will require much more land. So even so, here also we see that this also follows the monocentric assumption of a city, which has been which was in further latest models of bid rent. This was for relaxed. That means these models could be applied to polycentric cities as well. And this also meant that if I want to bring in housing for MIG, middle income groups or lower income groups in the inner part of the city, I have to subsidize them. So that means planning agencies realize this particular theory of bid rent, and they also they thought that we can subsidize housing and that will actually result in reduction of urban sprawl, and this also fits into the overall bid rent framework. So finally, from bid rent we come to the discrete choice model. This was proposed by McFadden in 1978, and this is a model which says that choices between two or more discrete alternatives can be considered where it could be considered following two theories. One is Luce's strict utility theory or Thurston's random utility theory. This utility theory means, basically utility, the term utility basically means suitability for a certain use. That means utility varies from individual to individual or from a farm to farm, and it means that how much the choice is suitable for this particular farm or this particular individual. So for each individual, the same land or same building can have different utilities, or similarly different land can have different utilities for the same individual. So this is the concept that is being utilized, and we can say that the probability that an individual selects a particular alternative depends on the utility of that alternative in relation to the total utility of all alternatives. So this is Luce's strict utility theory, where we say that the probability of selection is basically the utility of a particular alternative divided by the utility of all the different alternatives that is in front of him to choose. So this is the probability, this is how we estimate the probability for a particular choice. And we can similarly, if I talk in terms of land use and building use, I can say that the probability of a land use type or building at a certain location depends on the utility of the location for that land use or building type compared to the total utility of all possible land use and building types. So that is how discrete choice model actually is bringing in a probability component which was not there earlier in the location choice theory. So suitability or utility can be depending on many factors, and we can say suitability can vary as per the physical criteria. In case of agricultural land use, soil type could be a physical criteria that would be talked about when we talk about the utility or suitability. It could be accessibility or distance to different facilities. In case of a particular farm choosing to locate itself somewhere inside the city, or it could be different spatial policies of the land which actually encourages land use or building use. So suitability and utility can be defined by the person for whom we are actually determining this probability of choice of a particular alternative. So suitability depends on his particular or depends on the criteria he feels are important. So, suitability is synonymous with bid price, and what it means is a person's utility for a concept, what he feels how much is important is a particular piece of land or the utility of the land is the amount of bid price he is going to offer for that particular land. So, for a more land which has got more utility to a particular person, he will offer a larger bid price for that particular land. So, that is and how we can determine that? So, as discussed, the probability of a particular plot A being allocated or transformed to land use type I given by PAI, we can estimate it by considering by calculating the utility of that particular plot A for land use type I, and we can take the exponential of utility of that particular plot divided by the summation of utilities, again to a raised to the power of exponential, and we say that all the utilities of different plots that are there, we are summing them up, and that actually gives us the total probability of a plot being allocated or transformed to land use type I. So, beta is the parameter. This is one parameter which is also multiplied with utility. It is the parameter which is used to adjust the sensitivity of the model. What it means is, based on actual data, we will try to fit the model and we will change the value of beta till it matches the results that we get by estimating the model could be it matches with the actual data that we have in hand. So, this is also called calibration of the model. So, this is how we can determine utility of a particular choice compared to other choices. So, these are the two references you can follow for this particular lecture. And we can conclude this lecture by saying economic theories of land use and land price are the basis of many land use models. The location theory states that the location choice of a farm or an individual is based on minimizing transportation costs. Individual or farms select a location where the bid rent matches with rent or price demanded, which again depends on a trade-off between building land price and transport cost. So, that means an individual or farm can select a location where it first evaluates the amount of transport cost or that particular or other costs that comes for locating in that particular area, and based on that he forms a amount of price that he is willing to pay for that land, and that when it matches with the price demanded, then the land is actually sold, or there is a clearing happening in the demand and supply. And then finally, discrete choice model is also used in determining probability of a land use at a certain location where different suitability criteria can be evaluated in form of an utility equation. Thank you.